AI agents are just so much better out the gate. They start copying the code, they start running, but then they plateau and humans slowly catch up and supersede them. So we win at the long context game. Some of the studies that recently came out, it's just these AI agents break down over time. And that feels like the biggest stumbling block to really having AI agents.
So many companies just banging the door on AI agents 24/7. If you work inside those companies, the employees are like, these things don't work. They suck. And they're convincing everyone this is the way to go forward. I will know that AI agents have arrived when you have managers saying, I'm willing to sacrifice headcount in order to get an AI agent. I am willing to not increase incremental headcount growth because I want an AI agent. I don't know anyone worth their salt besides some random person on Twitter who's smoking crack who says, yeah, I'm running everything by AI agents and blah, blah, blah. Welcome to the SVIC podcast, where we deliver tech insights without the hype. Join my co-host, Joe Trinaski, and me, Jordan Thibodeau, as we break down the latest in tech, cut through the hype, and host top industry guests for exclusive insights. We are joined here by the one, the only, Wes Roth. Wes, thank you for joining us here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. If you didn't see part one, go ahead and click here. I'm doing this right now because I hate doing post-production editing. So, Joe, Wes had a wonderful question. Like, what's going on with this jingoism in the Silicon Valley? Like, we were doves 5 minutes ago, and now we're like, we got to nuke the Chinese with the nuke us.
We're very hawkish all of a sudden.
Yeah, the Red Scare.
It's kind of, yeah, it's interesting. I think in some cases, Jordan, it goes back to your description of motivated reasoning. I can imagine if the CEO of Anthropic, Dario, goes to answer questions and says, hey, we should prevent China from just having unfair advantages and getting ahead of us. That sounds reasonable. Okay, what do you have in mind, Dario? Well, for example, we shouldn't ship them the latest chips from NVIDIA. That's not an unfair advantage. That's like a level playing field. Why shouldn't Chinese companies get NVIDIA chips? Well, because they might get to AGI ahead of us. And you have to understand that whoever gets a slight lead and manages to achieve AGI or ASI first, then it will be a takeoff, like a runaway, where nobody else has a chance to catch up. And even a month or two of being ahead in that manner would be just a huge change to the economy, politics, military posture. Everything would suddenly shift. And so we can't allow that to happen where we're behind them. So first of all, that's complete catastrophizing. It's not at all obvious that them getting a little ahead means all these things suddenly happen and it's irreversible. Second, it's not really clear that having China get to AGI first is worse for humanity than having the United States get there first. I'm not really 100% sure that I could claim that. But let's say I believe that. Third, why am I punishing NVIDIA specifically? They're just one layer in this technology stack. There's a whole bunch of other pieces involved. Fourth, to Wes's point earlier about reading all these papers, we were blithely publishing all kinds of fascinating scientific advances in machine learning right up until just the last couple months when it suddenly became a huge commercial race in the United States. It wasn't until we saw how wildly successful ChatGPT was that suddenly OpenAI is a completely closed shop. And Google itself published the Transformer paper to the whole world,
right,
not knowing what it meant yet. You know, they had it. The people who worked on it knew that it was something. But the people at Google didn't stop them from publishing. If we really believe that this is a national priority, like us versus China, toe to toe in nuclear warfare, whatever the crazy Dr. Strangelove thing you want to, describe or frame, we should have never been publishing that research, not just refusing to ship them the latest GPUs. So I'm completely confused by all these things at once. And to your question, Wes, it's pretty awkward for me to hear someone in charge of a foundation lab say that they don't want China to get GPUs, for example, when those foundation labs hire huge numbers of Chinese graduate students who are Chinese nationals, and they're producing more than half of all the researchers in the world, that one country. Like we have, if that's our national priority, why are we taking them into American schools and educating them? Like, we have all kinds of conflicts in this.
Right. And
then if I just focus on Anthropic or OpenAI, then my reaction is, oh, you're clearly talking your book. It's in your interest for some Chinese lab not to undercut you the way that DeepSeek did, for example.
I totally agree. And one thing about the awesome Chinese expats we get here who are through all these great AI research labs, who are working super hard, and they're great. They eventually get their green cards and they stay here in America. It's fantastic. If we're going to say, let's hold back GPUs, China can then say, hey, we're going to hold back those researchers because we have DeepSeek now. We have Huawei who needs them. We also have Alibaba who needs them, the company who made Qwen 3. And then, you can have your GPUs. We're going to have our research scientists. And another point about export controls, we've been harping on how they've failed. In the 90s, we were afraid of China creating their own supercomputers because of with CPU use, and we blocked them, and then China caught up. And then now, Huawei just came out again saying we're coming out with chips that are as good as A100.
Oh, you skipped the part where we blocked them from buying communications equipment.
Go for that, Joe.
Mostly from Cisco. And they made sure that they funded hundreds of companies, and Huawei emerged as a powerhouse, building probably better hardware than Cisco and certainly much cheaper.
You know what? Next time we go barbecue, it's on me, Joe. That was a good point. So we created Huawei through our own export controls mistakes, and here we are now. So that's bad. Now we also harp about motivated reasoning is because on the All In podcast, you'll see Chamath and David Sachs circle jerk about export controls and how great they are, but Chamath doesn't explain what companies he invested in. Oh, Groq.
That's right. Groq.
That's right. And they're an NVIDIA competitor. That's right.
Knew there was something.
I knew there was something going on. Now, what if he went to Chamath and said, also, I think there should be export controls on Groq's GPUs. Stop the count, Right. That's why also...
Totally unfair.
Totally unfair. So there's a gentleman named Eric Schmidt. You might have heard about him.
Oh, God.
And so he wrote that paper with Alexander Wang trying to compare GPU or compare AI to nuclear war. Now, that's a slap in the face of JFK. JFK had a 13-day missile crisis where it was like basically a butterfly's dick length. We were away from going nuclear war. It was for JFK, RFK, and Khrushchev telling the hawks in their administrations, it's time, let's calm things down a bit. Country annihilated. So anytime I hear people comparing AI and nuclear war, I'm just like, Jesus. So of course he does that. But then he fails to mention that he has multiple startups he's funding right now that would benefit from the government believing the garbage he's talking about so they can get more Department of Defense contracts. Then Alexander Wang, who Scale AI, they've been focusing on labeling data for these AI labs. Even Google uses them. Well, Joe was showing me in Qwen 3 and other research papers, now they're saying, hey, LLMs generate synthetic data, and now sometimes they're labeling their own data, and now they're also cleaning their own data sets. So,
or the absolute zero approach that Wes was describing.
Right. So, do we really need Scale AI? So what does Scale AI do? Now they're trying to become a Department of Defense contractor, and they've scored a contract for $250 million. And so they want to push this AGI, go against the CCP. They're going to destroy us. It's them or us. Right. So motivated reasoning is something that we all have to be aware of and do our due diligence on these people. Because if you go on CNBC, anytime an analyst talks about any stock, they show a screen saying this person has a position to either buy the stock or sell the stock. Yet we don't do that for venture capitalists, and we don't do this for people who are doing these committees and talking about how bad AI is.
So we just raised at least 10 points. Wes, what do you think of this whole mess?
Oh, yeah, this is huge. And so this is one of the things that I do want to learn more about, because you guys know tons about like the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, all the shenanigans and what everybody's investing in, stuff like
baseball.
That. Yeah, I mean, so obviously, yeah, Chamath has, I think, one of the early investors in Groq. Groq obviously is doing very well from what I hear. It's an incredible chip. And yeah, so obviously if they can like shut down NVIDIA, that's only good for his company. So he's talking his book, same Eric Schmidt. Yeah, Alexander Wang was at that Davos meetup where you were saying how DeepSeek has tons of NVIDIA chips that they're not supposed to have. Later, it turns out that was not the case. It was like a case of broken telephone. because the guy from Semi Analysis, I guess, said one
Mm-hmm.
thing, then Alexander Wang took it to mean something else, then goes on television and,
Wait,
and
go
says,
deeper into that because
Oh,
I
yeah.
have I one thing I talked about Joe is called the Dick Cheney effect. It was master. I didn't support the Iraq War, but I support the troops. But it was masterful. What Dick Cheney did. He first wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying like, "We got they have yellow cake and blah 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 blah." Then he wanted to meet the press, and he was like, "The New York Times reported that they had yellow cake and blah blah blah." And so he created his own echo
Right.
chamber, and then people just went with the story. And you're seeing these AI labs do it too. Can you break down the whole Alexander Wang telephone issue, please, again?
Yeah, so the guy at Semi Analysis posts great stuff very often, either just posts great analysis or leaks some information to hold. There is no moat memo out of Google back in the days. I think they first published it. So definitely, and they know, they have a deep view into the industry. So I guess, I don't remember the exact details, but he said, okay, yeah, DeepSeek must have had their hands on the following chips, which was, I think, still okay. Like it didn't necessarily mean that they broke any export controls or anything like that. But I guess Alexander Wang either misunderstood that either intentionally or or on purpose. Then at the Davos meetup, he goes on CNBC or whatever it was and goes, "Yes, DeepSeek has all these NVIDIA chips that they're not supposed to have. That's why they're able to build this thing." That's if I recall correctly, that's what happened, and that sort of kind of definitely.
And that's the very gentle version compared to like, what's his name, Lucky Palmer,
Right.
Palmer Lucky, yeah,
guy, Palmer Lucky.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, his version was much more red meat.
What did
Oh,
he
he
say? I
was
missed
just
that.
like, oh, DeepSeek. What's really going on is the hedge fund has actually put massive short positions on the U.S. market that release this to then capitalize on the Magnificent Seven losing money, which is just the communists trying to destroy capitalism.
That's
And we
right.
got to nuke them.
Yeah,
You see
that
that part? But
psyop.
yeah, it's a psyop.
That's right. Do you think they took out short positions? I mean, they do have, but the thing is, I think everybody was they were probably as surprised as everybody else. I don't
They
think
were baffled.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they released this model they had it out for a while. No one like really cared. They saw the research was out for a while. No one really cared. And then
the negative reaction against the large cap tech companies was really misapprehending what the research meant. It was like an overreaction and kind of unrelated, because you still needed to train a very large traditional model. And then you could do a little bit of training on top of that, RL training, to get it to be a reasoning model. And then as a third step, you could take that large reasoning model that you'd now constructed and distill it into a much smaller model. But you still paid the price for the large original model. So it wasn't like all the training just evaporated, which would have been great if they discovered that. I'd be even happier. But that wasn't the case. And they said so in the paper. They're like, well, you still have to train this damn original model to start with the hard way, with a lot of compute and a lot of samples. And that's why I got so excited. And I think Wes had the same reaction. When I saw the Absolute Zero paper, I was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now we actually see a potential route to not have to train that original massive model as the starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think the DeepSeek, so they said whatever the number they said, they built it for 6 million or whatever it was, that's what spooked a lot of people. But the amount of money that they had to put into it, developing the infrastructure and everything else, in order to be able to release that model for 6 million, that's what I think everybody missed. AI Explained is a channel on YouTube. He did Philip, I think, is the guy behind it. So he did a great deep dive into the founder of DeepSeek. Seems like an absolutely fascinating person. And a lot of the stuff that he talks about, like how he approaches benchmarks. He's like, I don't care about the benchmarks. We're not going to game the benchmarks. We're just going to focus on real world use cases and just everything.
Here.
Yeah. He's
man. Amen.
And he's not playing the fundraising game. He's not playing the short term game. He's playing like the really long term game. And so I feel like, we're going to see a lot. We're going to see a lot of incredible things out of that team, because I think they're just going to be on a roll creating incredible tech, open sourcing it. And so I was going to ask you, so in terms of the people that are kind of afraid of China and kind of being a little bit more hawkish about China and stuff like that, while at the same time having companies that are sort of in competition with them, how big of a deal is the fact that a lot of these Chinese companies are open sourcing a lot of these models. Is that the big threat? Is that almost like they're afraid that they're going to lose their ability to raise capital and get paid for the stuff that they produce if DeepSeek just drops the best models and just like it's open source? Is that the big
those
threat?
damn Chinese labs are joining Facebook and being open source. Who would have thought?
Yeah. So do you think that's one of the big things that they're afraid of, is that the open source is just going to be undermining OpenAI and Anthropic and such?
I mean, it forces them to stay at the boundary, right? They have to stay a step ahead of whatever's being open sourced, because certainly anything that does get open sourced is in a large way commoditized. I think that's true, and probably it's a little frustrating for the foundation labs. They do all this hard research work, and then somebody reverse engineers it in their minds and then open sources it. I think Sam made this point. He was describing how difficult it is to develop something when you don't yet know if it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you see somebody else do it, even if it's proprietary and they don't tell you how they did it, now just the fact that you know it's possible and you have a rough idea for what direction they used, what approach they used, means that it's much easier for you to reproduce it. And he found that kind of annoying that he had a lot of fast followers behind him, right? But I think to your point, this goes to the classic commoditizing the complement strategy that Microsoft was always taking. If somebody open sources a whole bunch of interesting stuff, they make it no longer be a competitive advantage for anybody else.
Right. Yep. Well said.
If they have something else that is their competitive advantage, they are relatively advantaged by this other pillar being removed.
Yeah, and that was the point that Balaji made. I'm not sure what you guys think about it. So he's pretty big. He's in the crypto space. I think he's on Coinbase.
Wait, Balaji's in crypto? I had no idea. I only watched that 7-hour-long brainwash Lex Friedman interview, for Christ's sake. Jesus Christ. Just start your interview with, like, guys, I have a lot of bags in crypto right now. If you just go buy some crypto from me, I appreciate it. Then I can just stop watching. Yeah.
But that was his point, kind of. I think that this is a way to maybe kind of undermine some of the U.S. foundational like frontier AI labs, is by just making everything all the AI open source, because China has an advantage of making physical things. So if they're able to kind of like take the teeth out of the software, the AI software, et cetera, on the US side, they can still produce all the robots and all the trinkets and stuff like that. And he, if I recall correctly, it was almost saying that the Chinese government might be specifically funding those efforts. What do you think about that? Is it just a crazy idea, or do you think that might be a strategy that's being employed?
So I was in political science at Santa Clara University, and there's a professor called Professor Strover. And when you're in school, you're always like, why am I doing this? And then you get one professor in one class, you're like, oh, like, okay, that was worth the price of admission. And so he asked us, okay, everyone, so why do we go into the Iraq War? And some person was like, oil. And so he put down oil. And, why? Saddam might have tried to kill Bush Sr. or something. Israel, U.S., risk of nuclear weapons. The fact that there is another dictator in the Middle East that we need to overthrow. And so he was like, you know what, you're all right in your own different directions. But actually, when you make a decision in business or in policy, you're kind of in the fog of war, where you have all these little different reasons why you're doing something. And then we make a decision. It's easy for someone to go post hoc and say, oh, it was only because of this one element, and that's why we got here. It's usually a mixture of different things. Like, if I was a CCP, they would be crazy right now to say, you know what, let's not have an industrial policy that goes towards us building our own GPUs and AI, because there's probably no use for that in the future. It's like, no, you're going to put resources towards that. But then going back to High Flyer and the DeepSeek example, that dude, before he created his quant fund, was super into AI. Like, he was a true believer, but eventually he's like, oh, I got to make money somehow. Or I guess I'll do quant funding. Right. My heart's not really into it. And then as time went on, hey, I'm making more money than God. I can now crusade like Zuckerberg's. Well, before Zuckerberg, I can crusade into AI and start training models. So the government aspect of it, but then you also had people who are really interested in the science and technology, and then you also have tons of Chinese expats who are also into AI or coming to American labs. So you have all these things coming together leading to it. But Joe, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it too.
Yeah, I like that description. I think of those old pie charts about the PC software industry or the hardware industry, where they would show all the different vendors who made like hard drives and motherboards and cases and operating systems and apps and so on. And when you looked at it, there'd be like a huge wedge that was Intel because the CPU was so expensive. And there'd be another huge wedge that was Microsoft because you had to pay a fat amount of money for Windows and Office. And remember, these are the wedges for profit, right? These are the people who kept a lot of the money out of the sale of every PC. And then you had all the people who made motherboards and cases and hard drives and all these other hard to make components, but their margins were really thin. Even if their revenue was good, they didn't keep much.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that and I think, okay, same thing is happening to a lot of products in China or like say the modern auto industry, where they're looking at, the software they have to pay for in order for their product to work. And they're like, hello, software bastards keep fat margins, right? Like if they sell something for $1, they keep, 60 cents of it. Whereas we're over here just beating the hell out of each other, competing to make widgets. And if we sell something for $1, we're lucky if we keep a few pennies.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's your business, you immediately have to be thinking, how do I keep more of the money when I sell this product? And if the software guys are the ones who are collecting all the cash, your target's pretty obvious.
That's a really good point. And, we saw this too with just Facebook, how they created the Facebook phone, which everyone laughed at. And the big issue was I hate that I get squeezed to death by Apple. They control the stack and to play their goddamn games.
Mm-hmm.
They decided to put on this privacy thing. Now I got to change the way I'm doing my ad targeting. And then you see OpenAI right now, that partnership with Johnny Ives to create some hardware device, which I think is fraught because I'm carrying a cell phone around. Now people have watches, and then you want me to carry a third device? Like, this thing has to be pretty damn good to do that. But the reason why OpenAI is doing it is because they want to control the whole entire hardware stack.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, Google's pushing Gemini down my throat 24/7, like Google Plus back in the day, and it's frustrating. But OpenAI wishes they had that so they wouldn't have to deal with Google's garbage. Then you had the Windsurf acquisition again. Like in tech, especially on Twitter, we have a tech-centric view on how companies are run. We just think, oh, technology is the most important thing ever. And that's why companies are worth a lot of money. And Windsurf, oh, that's a VS Fork. I could have created that yesterday. It's like, well, one, why didn't you do it? And then second, if you could do it, then why aren't you selling it for like $2 or $3 billion? Oh, that's right, you can't. There's a lot of other factors going on into why businesses are successful. And another reason why OpenAI did this is because they wanted to actually be able to have the enterprise relationship, the developers are where they're committing code, and have access and insight to that so they can get that information to build a better product.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ties to what Joe is saying. Instead of being at behest of Windsurf or behest of Cursor, we want to be on the top of that stack and have that relationship with the end customer and user so then we don't get squeezed in between.
Give Wes a crack at what he thinks of that deal.
Yeah, go for it, Wes.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So they bought Windsurf for $3 billion. There's also Cursor valued at $9 billion. It looks like Google is building their own kind of a version of it, which is called the Firebase Studio, which I'm very excited about. It's not quite there. It's still a little bit clunky. It still has issues, but it's got that. It's got the Gemini 2.5 Pro integration, and then it has an ability to very easily publish that stuff online. So if you have an app, you can easily just publish it online. It gives you all the analytics, all that stuff, like few clicks. So I think it's making it brain dead simple to do that. So if they are able to get it to the same like level of quality as Cursor or Windsurf, I feel like that's going to be huge for them. And it's the same exact thing, right? So it's VS Code, a fork of VS Code plus a chatbot that's sitting on the right side panel. So if I understand correctly, so is Google trying to build their own Cursor to get that flywheel going of users using it and building data? That's what's happening there, right? Okay. So they're probably not going to be acquiring a Cursor or anything like that.
Oh, they probably would still consider it. They just want to get in the game. This goes to, I think, to Jordan's earlier point about if you're building the models on the back end, you need to see how people are using them. and which completions they're choosing and so on, that means you got to be in the middle of the whole process. You got to sort of own the stack, to use the Silicon Valley language. But Wes, is Firebase Studio online only, like in the browser only, or does it come packaged as a standalone app?
I haven't seen it. I just seen it online only.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any standalone. Yeah, so it's like Google Colab. It's pretty good. I'm enjoying it. It's a little clunky, but I feel like if they polish it up, it would be amazing.
Isn't it kind of bizarre to have Microsoft create Visual Studio Code and open source it, and now there's a massive business competition around products that are based on their open source code base?
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm glad they did it. Yeah. What do you guys think about that? I mean, is that gonna help people create more open source stuff like this, or is now companies are going to be a little bit more careful to put that much value out there? Because I mean, Google's using it, right? If they end up spinning it out into something massive, obviously Microsoft would not want that.
And Windsurf just got acquired for $3 billion, something like that.
Yeah.
And Cursor is worth what, $9 billion in the last round?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of very valuable companies, at least on the speculation side, all based on a code base and a product that Microsoft sort of built, promoted, encouraged all those developers, and then at some point kind of changed their mind, open sourced it, and kind of backed away from it, as far as I can tell. I don't really understand why Microsoft, and especially with GitHub, isn't right in the middle of this mix,
right?
Building a killer version of Visual Studio Code that's integrated with somebody's language models.
I mean, you think that GitHub had the first relationship with OpenAI, like they knew what this Copilot would be and what the possibilities were, and then they just couldn't execute on it. Now, Joe, you sent me a research paper called The Span of Control in Businesses, and I think this kind of ties to that. Maybe you can talk a little bit like a high level about that.
No, it's all you, man.
Okay, so basically, there's a theory that there's companies that insource things, like a core thing that you're doing. Maybe you're a restaurant, you make hamburgers, and you make roasts and soups and things like that. But they get to a certain point that there's only so many things you can do, and eventually you outsource certain things. So maybe you might get a pastry chef, or you're going to outsource towards a cleaning company to come in and clean your organization, your restaurant. Now the same thing applies to these tech companies. Eventually, it's like you can be in so many different product areas, and you think that maybe you can just keep on hiring people to give you more ability to control different things. The problem is all these decisions end up falling on someone's desk at the end of the day of what are we going to pursue, what are we going to improve, and where the trade-off's going to be. And so people have been saying for the longest time, Google's going to crush OpenAI. It's going to happen. Well, it's been about 3 years now, and they still are nowhere near closer of crushing OpenAI. And I think the issue that people don't understand is a lot of these CEOs are so spread out on these big company CEOs are spread out in so many different areas. It's impossible for them to stay on top of all these other different decisions in industries. And it even happens in startups. Like Sam had a decision of saying, hey, I could pay $3 billion for Windsurf, or we could try to build something internally. But what's the opportunity cost of us going out there and spending my engineers' valuable time away from building the core ChatGPT product that's getting 500 million weekly visits? Or I could take this $40 billion that we have and just spend $3 billion of it and be half cash, half equity, and just get 80 people from Windsurf who've already dialed in and can control the market. And so bring this all back of where it's going on with Microsoft right now. I just think they have way too much stuff on their plate and they're not able to execute on these things. And that's what's hurting Google now too. But I'd love to hear what you two think.
So quick question about what's happening with Google. Because is it that, so there's sort of like Google proper, and then there's Google DeepMind, separate offices, separate cultures, separate management and people. And I think Gemini was called Gemini because of the twin kind of companies. I don't know if that's the case or not. It just seemed like to me. How much of the recent Google success would you attribute to the fact that it seems like the development of all these AI models of LLMs is shifting from sort of the Bay Area Google to the more Demis Hassabis team? And is that what's happening or no?
No, I
No.
think it ties to Joe's point. Remember what you said about it's so much easier to be a fast follower to someone who's already created the breakthrough
Mm-hmm.
compared to creating the breakthrough yourself. So once OpenAI came out with ChatGPT, or let's take a step back. The reason why I, maybe Joe also, are so cynical towards these AI doomers and alignment people is that we've dealt with them internally inside of corporations and how they have hurt Google, who had the opportunity to actually take a lead in this race a very long time ago.
Mhm.
They could have released Lambda and other things like that, but they had Blake Lemoine and all these other AI ethicists saying, well, what if someone does a completion and it pisses off bees and Alpha Centauri? Well, we can't do this. We're going to hurt people and blah, 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 blah. And so you get stuck in like this endless circle jerk of getting into this whole completeness fallacy of trying to figure out every edge case. And I think what the issue is for Google in this circumstance was that they got caught up in their own internal bureaucracy. But then once ChatGPT got released, it was like, this is a threat to our core business. And it gave Sundar an excuse to douche out of the system all the garbage and all the trash. It didn't matter anymore. OpenAI did the same thing too with the board drama and getting rid of all the alignment people into Anthropic. Peter Thiel told Sam Altman years ago, I am not funding you anymore. I kicked him out of my program, and you need to get these EA people out of OpenAI now, or you're going to regret it. And Sam was like, politics and things like that.
Yeah, he gave him a clear warning.
He warned them, yeah.
Right, exactly. So I see one is this, they finally had competition that like woke them up, was the main driver. But then as far as like, was it DeepMind and things moving over there? It's making things easier. I think it's more of Sundar just saying, "Hey, all these years I've been trying to make all these different teams happy with AI. I need to consolidate this under someone." Now, DeepMind decision to buy that company in 2014 was Larry's decision, and Larry specifically said, "I want to keep this company in an island, and I don't want Google proper to f with it. So let them do what they're doing, and don't let our culture get in the way."
The way that YouTube worked.
Exactly. And then also people forget that Demis Hassabis was on This Week in Startups, and they asked him, Jake Howe was like, like, when did you get bought by Google? And Demis said, to train more of these models, we needed more money, and it was the only way to do it was to get bought by a bigger company. Reminds me of OpenAI. Why did they kick a gigantic paycheck or a gigantic investment check from Microsoft? Because they needed capital to train more models.
SoftBank.
And now from SoftBank. So eventually, they were their own thing, and for the longest time, they tried to get attention from Google proper on seeing if they could work together on things, and it was too difficult. And it was only until ChatGPT came through that eventually it opened the floodgates for them. But Joe, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this too.
Yeah, I think you described it well. I mean, in the earlier days, you could see papers from these companies that would have researchers from 2 or even 3 different companies, including Google and OpenAI. And now you just can't even imagine that.
Yeah, I used to see Google Brain or Google. Now you mostly see Google DeepMind as the only one, right?
Or you'd see a paper that people from Google Brain and people from OpenAI and
I see what you're
working
saying.
together on some project because it was a research project.
Right.
Now everything has an immediate commercial impact, and everyone's become much more quiet about what they're doing.
Yeah, if like attention is all you need, if that paper didn't get published, I wonder where we would all be now. Like how different everything would have looked.
Yeah.
I'm very curious because I'm so excited about some of the stuff that's coming out of Google DeepMind, Isomorphic Labs. I've been kind of following them. That's very interesting. Just everything. They have the GNOME project that's building various discovering new material. I mean, just everything out of there is just so fascinating. At the same time, so I feel like if Google DeepMind was its own standalone company, I would love to invest in it because it's connected to Google. I feel like Google's whole thing is, search ads, like one of the best business models ever. People clicking on search ads, like whatever billions of dollars they get for that. But doesn't it seem like there's this weird thing, whereas AI is taking off, the search is going to start trending down while the revenues from AI is going to be going up? Like, what happens to Google? Like, how do you even think about where Google's going to be in this environment?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Can they or will they make a pivot if it becomes necessary?
Right.
I mean, there was a period where Microsoft was sort of in the wilderness where, Windows was trending down and Microsoft hadn't really been successful outside of Windows and Office. And people kind of left them for dead. And then when Satya came in, it was like all of a sudden they started making a bunch of decisions that made sense, including the investment in OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
And they got a new lease on life. Like suddenly it's a revitalized company. So it's possible to imagine a few things going right for Google and the same kind of what the press calls the redemption arc playing out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't count them out. I think also there needs to be a new CEO. Joe and I do a prediction tracker on like where predictions are for next year and whatnot, so we can keep ourselves accountable. I thought Sundar would be gone by the end of last year because he's been here for 7 or 8 years, which is like an eternity for tech CEOs. I think
Did
for
you
Google,
bet silver Trump coins on that?
No, I should have. Damn it! I know I missed out on that one.
That's our usual bet.
Exactly, silver Trump coins. The novelty factor gets hilarious. But I think Google would probably need a new executive to put them into wartime mode, where they actually feel like, okay, now we're losing more market share in search. There was a recent kerfuffle in the news that during the DOJ trial that Google is dealing with for being potentially a monopoly, they had an executive from Apple speak and say, yeah,
Eddie Q,
there you go. Once we installed, a lot of people using Perplexity and ChatGPT search, we actually saw a decrease in people using Google search. And the whole stock market was like, right. Oh my God, and Google shares sold off by 8%.
It's happening.
Right.
Yep.
And then Google came out with the Iraqi information minister and said, no, don't be afraid of this. The stock went up, but just the sign they could potentially be losing a little bit of market share to Perplexity, ChatGPT search is already getting people on the edge. But I think in order for the company to switch from the old search model to pure AI, there would be a rough transitionary process where they wouldn't be able to maybe juice up the same earning per share that Wall Street would want. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Sundar would be the person to do that because you would have to make some drastic changes internally in the company. Mm-hmm. That's always tough.
Well, and you made the point about how cheap their money is too, right? Mm-hmm. I think Perplexity is trying to raise money right now at some crazy valuation, like 9 billion or 14 billion or something like that.
Yeah, 14 billion. They're trying to raise 500 million. They're close to closing.
So I would say these different AI companies, if they're perceived as AI companies, have an incredible amount of cash and an easy ability to raise more. So they can get away with losing money on queries that are very expensive to process. Google can't do that. I mean, if they suddenly put Gemini right in the Google search box for every single query, right, they would immediately lose a god-awful amount of money and probably melt down a bunch of their data centers. Mm-hmm. So their transition is much trickier. This is the situation that Microsoft was in, where Windows was the cash cow. And if you were inside Microsoft and you proposed a project that didn't also promote Windows, it wasn't enough that it was neutral or unrelated. It had to actively promote Windows,
right,
or your project would be canceled.
Right.
And they knew that internally. They would say it out loud. They'd be like, Windows is the platform. Your project should be promoting Windows, or we see no reason to fund it. And that's, they missed out on a whole bunch of important things that happen in the industry as a result.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe Google can take kind of a lesson from that to figure out how to go forward, because obviously AI seems like a much bigger thing than search. I mean, search is incredible. Obviously, they had this cash cow for so long, one of the best business models. But if it's going, I find myself using deep search more and more across various things. OpenAI, when it came out, recently been trying doing deep search with Google 2.5 Pro, and it's just incredible. I'm blown away by how.
Is it as good as OpenAI's deep search?
I think it's better. I've been using it in the last week or so, and
that's an endorsement.
Yeah, it's I love it, how deep it goes, and how it really captures exactly what you're going for. And also it really filters, because I've tried also, on the Groq doing their stuff. Groq seems to be like a kind of doesn't there's less critical thinking. Like, it doesn't dismiss stuff that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Talk about
Would it have
damning
anything
with
to,
faint
does
praise.
it have to do anything with Twitter brain rot affecting Grok? Remember,
That's a
I was
little less critical thinking.
I was
Good
told I
stuff.
was told Elon, the data set of every other week of someone saying Hitler did nothing wrong is worth so much for Grok. It's
Oh
worth
boy.
billions of dollars. It's going to improve its ability to think. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm curious to see what 3.5 will look like. So, I mean, they're definitely catching up because they had a late start.
Mhm.
But so far, yeah. So, I mean, OpenAI, when they launched Deep Research, it was great. I haven't tried up until like a week ago. I haven't tried Google's Deep Research. I've tried the one that's powered by 2.5 Pro, and it is just phenomenal. It's absolutely
Mm.
incredible. So I'll keep testing it, but the thing is, like back in the days when I used to do these kind of deep dives that I need to do research for, it would be between like dozens of Google searches, right?
Mhm.
Going
Mhm.
on Reddit, going down rabbit holes on Reddit, or just Google searches and all the other stuff. And now that's replaced with, as soon as an idea pops in my head, I jot it down into deep research. I hit go, and then usually you have to wait 5 to 10 minutes, right? So you go do your thing, and later you're like, oh, here's this massive report that I have to digest, but it's
Mhm.
just phenomenal. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love everything about it. So I don't see how that doesn't affect search volume, because that
Yeah.
just eats,
Yeah.
20 to let's say 100 searches that I would have done otherwise.
Right. No,
Yeah,
it's
there's so many places we could go with that as different topics. But I'm impressed that you think the Google one is that good. Have you? You must have read some of the papers about OpenAI's implementation of open research. Um,
I
I'm
have
sorry,
not.
deep research versus Google's implementation because they're very different under the hood.
Interesting. I will definitely check it out because I've been kind of ignoring. I really liked OpenAI's deep research, and that's I've been so I have dozens of more. I probably have 100 plus, maybe 200 since they've launched, because I have the unlimited plan. So I just whatever pops into my head, I launch it in there. So definitely,
Yep.
probably in the hundreds of deep researchers on OpenAI. In the last week, I started just on a whim doing Google. And so far, it's only a handful, but those handful have been absolutely mind blowing. So I got to do more research, but I
to the
will.
More
point of
research on
like,
deep research.
are you
Yeah,
saying like
exactly.
are you saying like 20% better than the OpenAI's deep research, 30%, or to the point where like
You want to pin them
I
down.
would never use OpenAI deep research again, because what I have going with me is a switching cost of I'm so used to using OpenAI for everything. And the moment I hear from some, oh, this new product over here is doing something cool, and like, okay, I'm going to teach myself to use it, and then OpenAI is like, oh yeah, we just took that feature. I'm like, God damn it! Now I gotta go back to where I was.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to say because I haven't made my mind up, and it's just from the few interactions. Like one of them, I was looking at trying to see what a lot of people that like are creative types and produce a lot of like creative work. I was curious if there was any sort of overlap in their day-to-day schedule, if there's any stuff that they tend to, some commonalities that they tend to do. Like, do they wake up
Mm.
early or later? Do they do meditation or this? So
Hmm.
I kind of like threw that in there. And wow, it blew me away because first of all, it starts out, it had this like great title. I forget what it was, but it was like very like artistic, which usually doesn't do that big because this was more like creative work. It had like a very creative title, and it just from the get go starts hitting you with interesting facts about Mozart and the various writers and the various people, like the fact that they all engaged in early morning activities where they would walk on
Hmm.
this. Then it went through how many of them used to do TM, transcendental meditation,
Hmm.
and like the
Hmm.
quotes about that. So so I had an idea like, okay, is there anything I can add to my day to just be able to just kind of have more energy and kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
create? Yeah. And within the first paragraph, I was like, wow, like there's so much here, so well written, so well
Outstanding.
researched. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one I did was various things for like stress management and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I was blown away by how deep it went, because first it went, okay, here's what stress is. It's, you can think of it as these four biological factors. Here are the research that supports the best things against that, and here are the sort of pathways by which you might do that. So like if you go running, what does that do? That's the, it helps with the neurotransmitters,
Hmm.
serotonin, but also it does this and this and this and this. So as you're sitting there, and it links to all the research papers and stuff like that. And I was like,
Hmm.
this is, because there's no fluff, there's no BS, because like with Groq, it's
Dope.
like some
It's pure
people enjoy,
dope.
yeah, yeah, because with Groq, it was like, well, some people enjoy like walking in nature, so that might be something to try. And it's like, okay, maybe, maybe not, but like, I'm not seeing like the stuff you're referencing in the
Mhm.
citations. It's a little bit weak. I mean, I get it, but I could have went to whatever healthline.com and found that
Mm.
information. Google is like, no, like here's the, and I forget, like there's some sort of a method for rating how much confidence you have in a study. It was like Davis's G, or I forget, unfortunately, but
Mm.
it ranked them all by how. So it's like cognitive behavior therapy versus aerobic
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
exercise versus yoga versus this, and it ranked them. And I was like, it seemed like a lot of thought and effort went into that. Like I don't know how much.
Okay, I'll try it. Damn
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Do
Oh,
you have
that was your.
do you have an affiliate link I can click so you can get your $10 from Google?
Hammering on you, Jordan. Pounding you.
You win. You win. Stop the count. Not in the face.
I forgot the original question. I just went on
No,
my
that's
own
like that's
tangent.
my life. I always forget the original question. I'm
This
just like
this
whatever.
kind
Go.
of feature is just such a attractive thing for someone who is interested in getting the complete picture and seeing all the links to the research in case they want to dive in. You know, especially if the model or the framework, depending on how it's implemented, has gone and actually looked at all those studies in detail in order to rank them. That's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
done.
really.
Like to your point, you could have done all those searches yourself, and you would have spent hours putting that together.
Oh yeah.
And you know, depending on how long you spent, done as good of a job or not. You know, I'm actually really curious about something you said earlier. All the research and projects you're seeing, and I guess to be kind of specific, how far away do you think we are from simulated people in meetings that are completely well simulated and you can't really tell?
North Korea is listening right now because they've been trying to do it for a while. Go Wes.
Oh, interesting.
Like right now, we can't really tell when we go to ChatGPT and we
Mm-hmm,
pick the most recent model. Like it passes the Turing test.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Sesame AI and their voice, you know, the empathetic voices. Those are pretty damn good. Like it's hard to tell if it's a real person or a simulated voice. And you've probably seen a couple services that are already producing video in almost real time, right?
Yep. Yeah, I tried an open source project. I forget what it was called, but yeah, basically you upload a new video in real time. Like it made me look like Elon Musk, Sam Altman. It was pretty good. It was all right.
Oh,
It
it's
was,
copying your movements and your
yeah,
speech.
real time, and I can shine a light on myself, and it like realistically
Mm-hmm,
sort of
mm-hmm.
trace that light and stuff like that.
Yep.
So now, so you're saying simulate people. You're saying, so can it simulate somebody like a real person to fool somebody that knows that person, or just simulate any random person?
Oh, that's a
Do you
good
know what I mean?
question. Let's assume it's not someone you know, but you've probably seen examples where you can give it a photograph or a short video clip,
Yeah.
and then you can say, okay, now give me that person speaking this script,
Yeah,
right? And you can imagine coupling that with a language model would allow for it to engage in a conversation.
yeah. No, I feel like we're pretty close in terms of like the fidelity of the sound and the video. I mean, video is still a little bit choppy. The sound, I feel like, is almost there. The with the sound, like if you listen to it long enough, you realize that it misses the like the intonations, because I guess it's not trained on what intonations mean, what specific thing. So it fails at those. But in terms of just sounding like a real person, it's there. Video mostly there. Hey Jen is doing their Avatar 4 or whatever it is. I feel like we're so close to, just if we're talking about like the fooling the senses, I think we're very close to that. In terms of long term fooling people, like as if it's the other person that has enough context about the previous conversation to keep like if you have a long enough conversation, can it reference stuff from some inside joke
Mm-hmm.
from last time or whatever. That's where it seems to fall apart. And
Mm.
Yeah,
most of
we're
these.
still at that Brian Johnson moment where it's like uncanny valley, like I want to live forever, but then my face looks like a bishop from the aliens. Like we're gonna get there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like Yeah, and so the interesting thing to me is like the whole idea of like the long-term coherence. That's where stuff really falls apart. Whether you're talking to a large language model or the AI agents, like OpenAI did a thing where it's like, can these AI agents replicate machine learning papers? So if there's some experiment that's
Mm-hmm.
proposed, can it replicate the code, run that? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's tested against machine learning people with PhDs or like studying for that. And so the AI agents are just so much better out the gate. They're like, boom, they start copying the code, they start running, but then they plateau and humans slowly catch up and supersede them. So we win at the long context game. And the same thing with some of the studies that recently came out. It's just these AI agents break down over time. And
Mm-hmm.
that feels
Mm-hmm.
like the biggest stumbling block to really having AI agents. Like if somebody is able to solve that issue, I think it's going to go hard.
Mm.
So I want to. We're running out of time, and I want to get into that because there's been so many companies just banging the door on AI agents 24/7. But then if you work inside those companies, most of the employees are like, these things don't work. They suck.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're convincing everyone like this is the way to go forward. And my real test is I will know the AI agents have arrived when you have managers saying, I'm willing to sacrifice headcount in order to get an AI agent.
Mm.
I am willing to not increase incremental headcount growth because I want an AI agent.
Yeah, that's a good test.
And so far, I don't know anyone worth their salt besides some random person on Twitter who's just smoking crack who says, yeah, I'm running everything by AI agents and blah, blah, blah. And so maybe that's what we can do part 2 of this conversation, go into that and what you think about it. Because that's what really got me into this is there's so much bullshit work out there in corporate that I was like, oh, ChatGPT could end this so I can focus on things I want to do. Not the whole, I'm going to replace all employees AGI tomorrow, but just more of the bullshit
This is
work.
the tasks versus jobs approach.
Yeah, like dealing with Workday or Concur and things like that. No one wants to do that. Not even the people who build Workday want to touch Workday, so why should I touch it? So anyways, for all of you who are watching, you can watch part 1 here. We also create a playlist specifically for Wes Roth viewers for some of our videos. Thank you, Wes.
This has been an incredible conversation. I love chatting with you guys. I've learned so much, so I do appreciate that. We definitely should do it again because this was absolutely incredible. This was very valuable to me. Hopefully it was valuable to all the watchers and listeners, and I would absolutely, would love to do it again one day.
Let's do it. All right.